you get to this impasse sometimes where they like the idea, they like the concept, but they're not willing to give up the deed and title to the house until they've been paid in full. In those cases, we descend to a different strategy, which still works. It's just not as optimal for us. And that's where we simply tell that seller, we're taking control of a property by leasing it from the seller, but we're retaining the option to purchase it at an agreed upon price and agreed upon terms. Now we're going to have the right to sublease it because we're not going to be living in there ourselves. We'll sublease it to one of our tenant buyers, giving them the right to purchase it from us, and we'll be making those same spreads that I just talked to you about at the beginning before I showed any slides. Now we do this when the seller won't deed us the property, but they're open to receiving monthly payments because we can just rent the house from them. And as long as they're willing to sell us the house during the term of that rental or in the term of that lease, then we're good to go. That's why we call it a lease with an option to buy or a lease purchase. Now, clearly, we got to have the right to sublease the property. That's the way we're going to make money, is we're going to sublease it and provide a purchase option to our buyer as well. So if you think about it, that is why this is called a sandwich lease. I've got a lease with an option to buy from my seller, and then me, I'm the meat in the middle. The meat is the money, right? The spreads. And then the other piece of the sandwich is me putting the buyer on top of that, where they are paying me more across all those metrics, also on a lease with an option. Now, I talked to you a little bit about rental arbitrage. I don't do that very much, but sometimes the seller won't give you the option to buy, but they're keeping it as a property for themselves, but it's not doing much for them. We agree to rent it. We explain to them what we're going to do with it. Maybe we're going to Airbnb it out, vacation rental it out, whatever we're going to do. We just need a fixed lease amount, pay them a certain amount per month, pay them a certain amount per quarter, whatever. And then we're going to juice up our cash flow by using other types of rental strategies. Could be short-term rental, could be one option, okay? So in those cases, you don't have to just walk away from somebody who has like a for rent by owner and you're like, hey, would you be willing to sell if I leased it from you? No, I'm never going to sell this. I'm keeping this forever. I'm going to let my kids inherit this later. But I'm not using it, so I want to rent it. Okay, well, I'll rent it from you, but would you let me sublet it out in a way where I guarantee the maintenance, guarantee the repairs? You're not going to have to worry about any of that, but I want to use it probably as a short-term rental where, I take responsibility for all that. We manage all that. That's actually how I'll make money. I'll get a little bit more cash flow coming in than what I'm paying you. That's one of our business models. Would you be open to that? A lot of people are like, tell me more. And if you have to, you can even cut them in on a portion of the proceeds just to get the deal done. This is rental arbitrage. This is something you can also do to get positive cash flow. Now, let's go back to what I mentioned to you earlier about it's more than just price. It's a whole basket of opportunities to make money, from the down payment to the monthly payment to the price. And I might have neglected to say that the fourth metric there is the term. I know that I did say sometimes the person that we sold it to doesn't end up actually buying it and paying it off in full, and they move on, they forfeit their deposit, which we would have applied to the price if they would have bought it, but they don't buy it, they move on, we go put someone else in there. That's what I mean by the term. The term makes a difference, because if we have 10 years with our seller, or 30 years or 15 years or whatever we have, we can churn through these buyers every year or 2 years and really make a lot of money in that dimension. So that's why these deals are so profitable, and that's why I'm even willing to do things that aren't perfect, meaning a 90-day close. You talk to that seller and they've got a $500,000 house, and in your mind you're thinking all day long, I'm going to be able to get at least 40 down on this thing that may end up being forfeited at some point. And if it is forfeited at some point, as long as I get a long enough term, I can put a second person in there and get 40 grand. But the problem is I'm a little uncomfortable because my seller wants 30 grand down, and they won't go any lower than 30 grand down. They'll finance the other 470 on the $500,000 purchase, but they want 30 grand down. And I'm like, I don't want to put 30 grand out on this until I've already located my buyer, or until I'm sure that the market will respond favorably to it. So I might just agree to the 30 grand down with the seller, because if you sell with a realtor, there's your 30 grand out the door, plus you have closing costs. There might be inspection concessions and things you have to do, and you might end up having to come to the close with money. There is no equity, actually. I don't care. I'm not selling it to you if you don't give me 30 grand. Well, and you might agree to, well, look, as long as you're saying that you'll allow your name to stay on the loan, transfer the property to me, as long as I give you the 30 grand and as long as we agree to make the payments on that loan that you have. But you could take it out to the market as a 90-day close, and if you have somebody who's willing to give you 40, well, you cover the 30 grand to the seller out of that 40. Maybe you're selling it to that person for 520 or 530, which means if they gave you 40, they'd owe 530 price, they'd owe you 490, and you only owe the bank what, 470? So you made 10 on the front because you got 40 from your buyer, you gave 30 to your seller, and you're probably making monthly cash flow on the deal. You've got 30 years on this house unless your buyer actually cashes you out, and you only gave your buyer like a year or two. I mean, that deal can be made to work, but you won't know until you go out to the market and see what the market brings. What if the market only brings you someone with 20 grand? Well, you're probably not going to want to give that seller 30 grand. So you got to go back to the seller and see if you're like, hey, look, we're going to have to walk away from this unless you can take like 10 grand. I'll give you 10 grand and take over your loan. That's better than you're going to get selling it through a realtor. So what we're doing is we're allowing the market to speak. We're running our world-class marketing campaign, our three-pronged attack. We see how the market responds, and we go back to the seller with the data. So the point is this: if we can't get a good enough mix of price, of monthly payment, long enough duration, low enough down payment, closest to zero as possible, then we can always just take the best terms that the seller will give us if it makes sense. Obviously, if they want 550 on a house that's worth 500, I don't even want to play with that. I know that's not going to work. But if there's some room in there where you think you can make it work, then we'll take those terms. So they're like, well, what happens when you do? Well, if and when we do, we'll simultaneously close on this deal. I'm going to fund the money I have to give you out of what my buyer is bringing me, and we're good to go. And if we wanted to, we could just assign the deal and get paid once, like a lot of people are doing now. But I don't think that's the right thing to do, but a lot of people are doing that. You could just assign the deal if you wanted. I think it's way smarter to stay in the middle. Okay, that's a 90-day close. So you've gone through all the different options that we potentially have to work with them on their house, and the majority of the time, what are they going to say? Yeah, I don't know, a little too fancy for my taste. I'm not sure I totally understand it. I think, I just want to get my money and go. I need the money for a new house. I need the money for this. Reason 1, reason 2, reason 3. I just want to sell it the traditional way. I don't want to do anything like that where I'm taking payments. That might happen in the first minute of your call with them. Well, we can come in at a very low cost because they're going to get more money working with somebody like us than anybody else. But they are going to have to live with the fact if they're fishing in that pond for that retail price paying, owner occupying, bank qualified buyer, all of those people are going to be represented. And even though I understand that coming later this summer, these buyers are going to have to contract with the buyer's agent, and the buyer's agent is going to have a contract for a commission. At the end of the day, that commission is still going to be paid by the seller because the buyer doesn't even have the money. Realtors are still going to drive buyers around as long as they qualify for a loan, because they know when they submit the contract, they're just going to put into the contract that the buyer's agency fee must be paid for by the seller. Otherwise, we can't do the deal, and the seller won't want to lose the deal. So they'll end up paying both sets of commissions anyway. This is just a big paper game that's being played. Don't let people fool you. That's what's going to happen. Ain't no buyer getting ready to pay the agent anything. The seller's going to be paying. So if we are unable to buy the property ourselves and we have a realtor license, maybe you have somebody in your family who really wants to operate as a realtor, well, bring them in here with me. A bona fide partner of yours related to you, I'll help you out, and they can get this education so that they can learn how to use their realtor license the right way. You can go into these calls agnostic as to which of these deal types the seller decides, but they're going to do one of these things. Most of them are going to want to do this last one, right? Most of them are just going to want to sell, get their money. But we can walk them through these because it sets the hook, if you will, because you get to show them what kind of guy you are, what kind of gal you are, so that you can get the license deal. Instead of trying to talk to them, oh, my marketing plan is so good, oh, I got buyers flying in from all over the world. Yeah, you're full of crap. Okay, once it's in the MLS, anything that you do over and above being in the MLS is very slightly incremental. The fact that it's in the MLS is pretty much what sells the property because it's distributed everywhere. You could be in Turkey and looking at houses in Alaska or Atlanta or San Diego. It's distributed everywhere, right? It's not the old days Being in the MLS is what is needed to attract retail price paying owner-occupant buyers, and we can bring that to them, but they're going to pay a fee anyway, so they might as well do it with someone who's going to net them the most amount of money, and that's us. If none of these previous ideas work for the seller, they just don't have much choice left. They got to fish in that pool of bank qualified retail price paying owner-occupant buyers. 99% of these buyers are going to be represented by a realtor because they perceive it as free for them. It's actually offered to them for free, even though they're signing a contract that a commission has to be paid. There's going to be a contingency on there that says as long as the seller will agree in the contract to cover the fees, they're not going to be able to buy the house otherwise. So they're not going to be owing anybody any commission. So, they can get everything handled for them with a degree of protection that makes them feel very, very comfortable. And sellers are just going to have to ultimately realize this, and they always do. All of these for sale by owners that fail, they end up listed with realtors because of this dynamic, which is an absolute fact. They're not selling that house and getting away with not paying a commission. They'll own up to that fact and understand that maybe this is the person I should be working with. They're a lot smarter than these other schmendricks who are calling me, trying to get a listing because, this guy tried to buy it. I had a nice conversation. I'd like to meet him, but maybe we will list it with him. Okay, so you guys, you go get that license. That's a license to print money because the values of real estate are through the roof and you're getting a percentage. It's not like the old days where the values weren't that much. The values are very high and you're getting a percentage. It's not like lawyers. Lawyers for decades have charged $600 to $800 per closing. I haven't seen this exponential increase in the cost of lawyers. Yeah, there's been some inflation, of course, in their hourly rates, but they're doing the same work. Well, a realtor does the same work on that house that was worth $300,000 in 2020 and is now worth $600,000, but they're getting paid twice as much. It's a license to print money, but you just want to do it behind your investor approach, because with the investor approach, you're building a much greater rapport with that seller because you're not trying to get anything from them. You're simply trying to buy the house from them and explain to them how you will buy it from them. And if that doesn't work, well, you're going to end up having to do this. You might as well do it through me. And it's like you didn't call them with that from the outset. So your ability to convert that seller into a listing is geometric proportions higher than the person who calls with the Tom Ferry script. If you don't know what that is, the typical realtor script that every single realtor uses that I get played on my voicemail like 30 times a day every time I advertise a house because these realtors have no creativity. Even when they're trained by good companies like Keller Williams and whatnot, everybody's reading the same script. It's like these people haven't changed their scripts in years. It's kind of ridiculous. If you guys do it this way, you're going to make a lot of money.